I was standing in the hallway when I heard my mother's voice say it was better if I did not come to the wedding. The words felt heavy, like someone had taken the ground from under my feet. My father's voice in the background spoke about harmony, as if my feelings were an obstacle to peace. At that moment I realized the decision had been made long before I heard it, and my place in the family had been erased without my consent. My name is Rachel. I am 24, a teacher, and the middle child in a family that has always treated me like the problem. They call me sensitive, dramatic, and quick to create conflict, even though I spent years trying to make everyone happy. My older sister is the perfect one, the star they place on every pedestal. Against her, I was always cast as the shadow. The shock of hearing my parents exclude me from the biggest day in my sister's life was sharp, but what cut deeper was how calm they sounded. It was not anger or heat of the moment, it was cold planning. That night, instead of asking why or begging to be included, I began to wonder what it would feel like to live without asking for their approval at all. The seed of a different path took root, and I carried the pain with me as a sign that something had to change. Growing up in my family always felt like standing in the shadow of a bright light. My sister was the one with perfect grades, the polished career, the kind of smile my parents held up as proof that they had done everything right. I was the one who cried too much, asked too many questions, and somehow carried the blame whenever tension cracked through the walls of our house. No matter how hard I tried to make peace, I was cast as the source of drama. The divide became clearer the day I scrolled through Instagram and saw her hand lifted, a diamond ring sparkling under filtered light. The caption spoke about the love of her life, about the new chapter she was starting. My heart dropped because no one had told me. I stared at the photo, reading comments from relatives and friends, and felt the cold sting of finding out like a stranger. When I called my mother, she brushed me off with a distracted voice. She said there would be a family meeting the next evening to talk about the wedding plans. I showed up at the house and smelled roast chicken and spices drifting from the kitchen. At the table sat my parents, my sister, and her fiancé, papers and magazines spread out like a battlefield I had not been invited to join. My mother looked up and told me they had not expected me. My father cleared his throat and asked me to sit. Their words came steady, almost rehearsed. They said it would be best if I stayed away during the wedding weekend, that my emotions were too unpredictable, that keeping me at home was better for everyone. I sat frozen, the sound of silverware clinking on the plates around me, the warm smell of dinner mocking the coldness in their tone. They spoke about harmony as if my absence was the price of peace. My sister would not look me in the eyes. I felt the walls close in, the truth pressing down. But under the weight of humiliation, there was a flicker. For the first time, I began to see that my silence was exactly what they wanted, and that my voice, even if buried, still carried the power to choose another way. A few days later, my phone rang, and it was my aunt checking on me. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, as she said she understood I could not make it to the wedding. The lie hit harder than the truth because I realized my parents had already rewritten the story for everyone else. I was not excluded. I was painted as someone too fragile or too busy to attend. The whispers spread quickly. A cousin told me they felt sorry for me, that teaching barely covered the bills, and of course I could not afford the trip. They said it with sympathy, not malice, but it felt like my dignity was being dismantled piece by piece. My family had turned me into a charity case. Instead of being honest about their choice, they created a version of me that was easier for them to explain. Then came the favor that felt like salt in an open wound. My mother asked me to stay at the house during the wedding to watch the dog. She spoke as if this was an act of maturity on my part, as if I was finally being useful. I nodded on the phone, but inside my stomach burned. They were celebrating unity while I was reduced to a caretaker, kept out of sight. The final insult was my father calling to ask for money. Since I would not be attending, could I contribute to the wedding flowers? His voice carried the tone of someone making a reasonable request. My mind raced with disbelief. I was not invited, but I was expected to pay for the beauty of the day. On the surface, I stayed quiet, offering polite responses, but inside the pressure built. Every conversation, every false story, every request was a reminder that I had been erased and rewritten. I was not the daughter left out. I was the fragile one, the poor one, the helper. None of it was true. The injustice sat heavy in my chest, but beneath the weight there was a spark of defiance. They thought I would accept their version of me. They had no idea I was preparing to write my own. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. Instead, I began making choices that had nothing to do with their approval. Late at night, while papers waited to be graded, I researched flights and destinations. The glow of my laptop felt like a secret window opening to a world that belonged only to me. Every small action became a declaration. I filed paperwork for my passport, held the cool cover in my hands, and felt like I had just claimed a new identity. I set timers for the house lights, arranged mail forwarding, and even bought an automatic feeder for the dog. These tasks looked ordinary from the outside, but each one was a step away from their control. Maya was the only person I trusted with my plan. She listened without judgment and reminded me that I did not owe my family endless silence. She told me I owed myself a life that was free and honest. Her words stayed with me like a compass. For the first time, I saw that my worth was not tied to their version of who I was supposed to be. Planning the trip became more than escape. It was a lesson in dignity. I saved money for years, always saying someday, and now someday was here. The tickets to Ireland, the itinerary through Edinburgh and Paris, were not just travel plans. They were proof that I had the power to choose. To anyone who has been called the problem, I know how heavy that label feels. Ask yourself who benefits from keeping you quiet. Ask yourself what you might discover if you stopped trying to fit the story they wrote for you. That night, as I zipped up my suitcase, I felt fear, but also a rising courage. I was no longer waiting to be included. I was preparing to walk into a life that finally belonged to me. The morning of the wedding, I rolled my suitcase across the polished floor of the airport. The loudspeaker echoed boarding announcements. The smell of coffee drifted through the air, and my heart beat steady in my chest. I sat at the gate holding my boarding pass, the paper warm from my grip, and for the first time in years I felt in control. My phone rang. It was my mother checking if I was settled at the house. I looked at the screen, then at the planes lined outside the window, and answered. My voice was calm as I told her I was not at home, I was at the airport. Silence stretched until I could hear her breath catch. My father took the phone, his tone urgent, demanding that I return. I told them they wanted harmony without me, and now they had it. I reminded them that keeping me out was their choice, and I was simply respecting it. Their voices rose, trying to pull me back, but I no longer bent under their weight. I was not cruel, just steady, like someone who had finally drawn a line in the ground and refused to step back. When the call ended, I tucked the phone into my bag and listened as the gate agent announced final boarding. Each step down the jet bridge felt like peeling off layers of shame. I sat by the window and watched the runway stretch ahead. As the plane lifted, the city shrank beneath me, and so did the hold of their lies. This moment was never about punishing them. It was about choosing myself. The roar of the engines drowned out the voices that had silenced me for years. With every mile between us, I felt lighter. I was not running away. I was breaking free. Back home, the story did not hold. Guests asked where I was, and my parents scrambled for excuses that sounded thinner each time they repeated them. Relatives sent me messages, some confused, some sympathetic, and others quietly angry that they had been misled. The lie that I was too poor or too fragile fell apart when photos of Dublin streets and Paris cafes appeared on my page. My sister reached out with a message from her honeymoon. She admitted she had been wrong, that she let our parents convince her I would ruin the day. The apology was hesitant, wrapped in guilt, but it no longer carried the power to heal or to hurt me. I saw it for what it was, an admission that I was never the problem. For the first time, I did not care whether my parents ever apologized. My respect did not need their permission. The lesson became clear as I walked foreign streets alone. Families, workplaces, even entire communities can rewrite truth to protect their pride. They invent labels for the person who questions, the one who refuses to bend, because it is easier to silence a voice than face the mirror it holds up. When that happens, the only choice that preserves dignity is to step outside their version of the story. I learned that false harmony is no harmony at all. Respecting myself meant no longer fighting for space at a table where my worth was denied. Some people will never see you as you are, but that does not erase your value. The moment you choose honor over approval, you stop being defined by their comfort. You begin to live on your own. If you have ever been pushed aside to keep someone else comfortable, I want you to know you are not alone. Your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Share in the comments a time when you chose dignity over false harmony, because every decision to honor yourself becomes a light for someone else. Subscribe if you want more than just stories. Join a community of people who believe in reclaiming strength, setting boundaries, and walking with respect. Tell me where you are watching from, and one choice you made that honored your self-respect. Together we can remind each other that approval fades, but honor lasts.